welcome to Addicted to Murder. This is Courtney, licensed professional counselor with over a decade of experience.
And this is Trisha, and I just today, by looking at this card, figured out what the word pizzle meant.
Pizzle. I feel like that sounds like a fun word, but it might not have a fun answer.
So you remember last week how we were talking about how people with anxiety like to rewatch things?
Yes.
One of the movies I have seen a million times, that's an exaggeration, many times, is Coming to America with Eddie Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a quote in there where Semi, Arsenio Hall's character, says something like to Eddie Murphy's character and calls him a diseased rhinoceros's pizzle.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So this caught my eye when I saw pizzle. And what pizzle is, the reproductive organ of a bull manufactured into a whip.
Oh. So it's a penis.
A penis that's turned into a whip, but from a bull. So when he says a diseased rhinoceros pizzle. Anyhow.
Right.
That's what that is.
It's a broke down rhinoceros penis whip.
Yeah. Apparently they turn bulls' penises into whips in some cultures. So
I did not know that.
me neither. Now I know what Semi was calling Akeem.
And now all of you guys know too.
I mean, it's just fun how this stuff goes full circle sometimes, you know?
It is. It is.
Yeah, so we're back with Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, part 3.
Yes.
I'm learning French again.
Oh.
I've been trying for years. I got like this program and I started it up again.
That's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably last like a month, if that.
Is that why you were watching Emily in Paris so you could practice your French?
Yeah, because I've got some friends who are moving back to France.
Oh.
So, well, he married her. He's French. She's American. And they've been living in Portland for like 10 years. And now they're moving back in 6 months to where he's from, the south of France, for several years. They're not positive if they're staying there indefinitely. But they invited everyone to go see them. So.
Oh, well, you have to.
You have to, right? And it's only respectful to attempt to at least learn the language of another country if you're giving it ample time to do so.
That's true. Although you'll probably get there, try to speak French, and then the French people will be like, please stop butchering my language, and we'll speak English.
Or will they say, I appreciate your effort, because some people don't even try to learn. Voulez-vous coucher la... Yeah. I know that means, do you want to? Voulez-vous?
Yes, that is true. Coucher avec moi is go to bed with me.
Yeah, I didn't want to finish that.
Mm-hmm.
But today I learned how to say coffee and water, laou, L-E-A-U.
Low.
Lou.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyhow, we'll see.
All right. Well, that'll be fun.
I know, I've never been to France before.
I haven't either. But I did take French in high school and college.
Yeah. I took Espanol. So it's kind of a challenge because, like, you know, Spanish
is
is
so different.
It is, but it's not. Like, there's some words that are the same, but like the, you know, el and la, and there's like le and la or whatever. Like I don't understand why
like gendered nouns.
I don't feel like English does that.
No.
Very often. So it's hard as someone who speaks English to like comprehend the genders of the nouns.
Right.
And then my Spanish keeps coming in and I want to do el or, you know, so I'm like, no, this is a different language, even though it's a Romance language. Like, anyhow.
Yep. The R's are pronounced totally differently.
Right. Yeah. They just sound, to me, French sounds like a round, fluffy language. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but like it's soft and round and like, I don't know. Pretty.
It is pretty.
It sounds pretty. But anyhow.
Right.
On to the next. I have a question for you.
All right. I am ready, I hope.
Based on our cases that we've done, Has there been one that stuck out to you that made you say, you know what? I would like to give to this type of organization to prevent this type of crime from happening? Or like, have you done like thought of like, because we touch on so much different kinds of abuse or domestic violence or poverty or anything like that. Can you think of something where you're like, I would like to, if I could, I'd like to give to a charity that addresses this?
That's a really good question.
It's kind of a weird one.
Because probably I would give to all of them, but the first one that came to mind was thinking about Juana Barraza. And, her story started with her being sex trafficked by her mom. And so I think trafficking is one cause. And I know we talked about it a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
But that's the first one that came to mind.
That is definitely like, I mean, she wasn't just she was trafficked for a freaking beer.
Right.
Or like a 6-pack. Like, yeah, that's just heartbreaking. I love it. I love that you would want to do that. What came to my mind was, do you remember Anthony Sowell?
I do.
We watched a documentary, and one of his survivors, she started like a charity called Cracked But Not Broken. I don't know if it's still going. But it was, if I remember correctly, it was like for women of like victims of like DV or whatnot, or even ones that were drug addicted, the cracked part,
right?
To get like resources and stuff like that to like help get them back on their feet and maybe clean and sober and out of those types of situations.
I was that.
Yeah, and I was like, if something so horrible had to happen, it's cool that like something good came out of it. I really hope that organization is still happening.
Absolutely.
But yeah, sometimes these cases make me like, because we're like, what can we do to prevent this shit?
Right.
And a lot of it is, stuff that needs money.
Pretty much, yeah.
To like get anything done, especially here in America, it needs money.
Right.
To fund it, and legislation and lobbyists and
attention, understanding by the public, all of it.
Yep. And to remove the shame, like all of that good stuff. So anyways, thanks for that answer.
Yeah, that was a good question. Took a nice turn to something a little more serious.
Yeah.
Which we need to do sometimes.
This is serious stuff.
It is.
We try, or at least I try to like, bring humor to it. And we have to do that at work. We talk about that sometimes. How we're like, do we feel guilty that we make jokes? Well, we have to, because it's so serious that you could just drown in it.
Right, exactly.
So you have to find, outlets.
Right, ways to bring some levity.
Yeah. So we're not insensitive for the most part.
We try not to be.
Do you want to recap for us?
Yes. So, week 1, we learned about Leonard Lake. Last week, we learned about the upbringing of Charles Ng, where he struggled to meet the expectations of his father and experienced abuse and rejection as a result. He was a loner with very few friends. He found some success in the military until he tried to steal guns from the armory, got caught, but then escaped and went on the run to find a survivalist in California.
So at this point, can you go over what diagnosis you think Leonard Lake and Charles Ng have now that they're full-grown adults and maybe even cricket?
So for Leonard, given his criminal history and his violent behaviors and the control and domination and all of that, I think that he would likely meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality traits. I don't know if he would meet criteria for both disorders altogether. But, also really using the non-clinical terms, I would say that, Leonard is a psychopath and a sexual sadist as well.
Okay.
Charles has a much more classic presentation of antisocial personality disorder due to his criminal behavior and difficulty with social interactions. And as for Cricket, I just don't know that I've got enough information about her to make any sort of diagnosis.
Yeah, I just threw her in there because of just because she went along with all of his sexual stuff that was a little, not run of the mill, I guess,
Yeah.
but
Maybe there's a fetish in there. Maybe she was a survivor of sexual trauma and that is being expressed in her adult relationships.
yeah, who knows what happened to her as a kid.
Yeah, those are entirely speculative, by the way.
Well, so when we finished last week, they had that gal that answered the want ad, and she was there for about 3 months to basically gratify them sexually, but also kind of helped around the hotel, and she left. So with Connie leaving, Leonard figured that Charles could pick up where she left off, like chores wise. So it wasn't long after that the three of them gave up trying to run the hotel, and they split. They found a youth camp to manage next. The owner of the hotel was glad to see them go because apparently guests had been complaining about Lake watching them in the hot tub. So he's like a voyeur on top of everything. The owner had also seen Leonard's cache of hand grenades once. It is apparent by now that Leonard is, I just said that, somewhat of a voyeur. He took many pictures of women and some children willingly enough, but he also secretly snapped pictures of others when they were not aware. So what's the deal with this, Courtney? I admit that when I go for walks, I like to look in through a window just to see how someone decorates, but I don't want to see a person though.
Right. So, voyeuristic disorder is a paraphilia listed in the DSM 5 TR where somebody gets sexually aroused by watching an unknowing or unconsenting person be naked, get undressed, or engaging in sexual activity. Now, many people get turned on through voyeurism, watching other people in sexually arousing situations. And that's not wrong or bad. But it's not considered a problem or a crime unless the voyeur is watching people without their knowledge or against their will. Or if it's causing other significant problems in their life, like they're spending so much time watching people through their windows that they get fired from their job, for example.
Is watching pornography a form of voyeurism then?
You would think, yeah, you could say that.
Okay. There was a tip that a wanted fugitive, Charles Ng, was working at the Philo Hotel, and that he may have weapons. The FBI was working with the local police, and they organized a raid that included land and air force. They thought that he was still at the motel. They observed his car going to his new location at the ranch nearby, so they changed their mark to that location instead. When they dropped from the chopper and to the ground, Charles jumped out of a window and made a run for it, and they grabbed him just as he was trying to hop a fence. When they started to search the property, they ran into Leonard Lake. Leonard said he did have some weapons, but nothing illegal, and the search continued. So the raid turned up 6 handguns, 6 rifles, hand grenades, TNT, a silencer, tear gas, and lots of ammo, along with martial arts weapons. Everything illegal, he said, was not his, but it was Charles. They were searching for a highly illegal MAC-10, and they found it disassembled. Parts of the gun were registered to Leonard, and therefore he too was arrested. Cricket was not arrested. The investigation uncovered that many of the weapons confiscated had been reported as stolen from several residences. Leonard was ultimately charged with 17 felony counts, and he would most likely be sentenced to prison. Lake always claimed that if he would take his own life before he went back to jail. He would take the cyanide tablet that was supposedly hidden in his shirt or his tooth. Leonard decided it was time to put his survival skills in action, and he did not show up for his court appearance, thereby becoming a fugitive. Charles, however, did not have the option of running. He was on a military plane headed back to Oahu, the scene of his first crime that brought him to Leonard in the first place 6 months prior. Courtney?
Well, obviously, stockpiling illegal weapons is concerning, but not surprising given Lake's belief in the upcoming nuclear holocaust and Ng's obsession with weapons of all kinds. What I do think is interesting is just how quickly Leonard threw Charles under the bus and blamed him for pretty much everything in order to try and save his own ass. He has no loyalty to anyone but himself.
Yeah, we'll see that again.
Yep.
He's such a dick. I mean, like, honestly, I don't know. So Cricket still cared for Leonard, and even though she wouldn't go on the run with him, she would still meet up with him at times to reconnect. Lake was moving from place to place. He would commit theft or sell marijuana to get money, and he would call these operations or ops. Hey, Courtney, when I learned about how Leonard Lake liked to call everything operation, this or, op that, I totally remind me of BTK because he had those projects.
It is reminiscent of BTK. And, I think it speaks to Leonard's need to believe that he was some kind of like military genius who had more experience and rank than he actually did.
One of the people Leonard would stay with was a man named Charles Gunner, and they had a really weird relationship. He was like a total asshole to Gunner, but I guess Gunner was an asshole to his daughters, which pissed Leonard off. Part of his dislike for Gunner was that he got disability checks and he was overweight. Both of these things were bad in Leonard's opinion. So remember how he hated his brother Donald, whom he may have in fact killed because he was considered a drain on society. Gunner also wanted his wife to have sex with other men, including Leonard Lake, and then he wanted to hear about it. So during this time, Leonard's sex drive was out of control, and he was going around the San Francisco area, meeting up with various women and selling pot. He was also trying to get more nude photographs from his various paramours. He was somewhat successful, and he would try to sell them. He was putting ads in papers to lure women as well. Rhonda Rayleigh responded to one ad requesting an 18-year-old to accompany him to Hawaii. Rhonda was 26, but looked much younger. The two hit it off, and eventually she told him her real age, and he started confessing to her all of his crimes. He even said he would kill himself one day, but not before certain people were eliminated. He elaborated that one such individual that needed to be killed was his pal, Charles Gunner. The pair had sex, and he did take her to Hawaii. Leonard wanted Rhonda to become a throuple with him and Cricket. Rhonda considered for a while, but ultimately she was not attracted to Cricket, so she left the party. Cricket and Leonard divorced in November of 1982. At this time, Leonard went to his family home and seemed to want to have a relationship with his brother Donald. If you recall, he expressed disgust for him because of his disabilities in the past. He asked Donald to go with him to work on a job up north. Donald was so surprised by the offer that he accepted immediately. When the pair left, it would be the last time that anyone would ever see Donald again, and it's speculated that Leonard killed Donald and then stole his identity and by doing that, his social security checks. Courtney?
I am in the camp that believes that Leonard did kill his brother. And I think this speaks again to the lack of care and loyalty he had to anybody in his life. If he was capable of killing his own family member, albeit one he did not like or respect, when he felt it could benefit for him, this will become a theme in Leonard's life going forward of killing people he developed relationships with in order to serve his own needs.
So in 1983, Leonard Lake started a diary. And this diary would hold secrets for the next couple years. So we do get some of Leonard going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Courtney, knowing what we do you think that this diary was sort of a trophy?
I don't really think of the diary as serving the purpose of a trophy, but that it's more like the trophies were more like the many, many photographs that he took. But I do think it's possible that the diary was sort of an exercise in narcissism and self-importance. Being a narcissist, he would have believed that his experiences and everything he had to say about them were very important and absolutely fascinating.
Well, and if his plan is ultimately to commit suicide,
right?
He's got a real long suicide note left that 2-year-long one or whatever.
Right. It's almost like writing a manifesto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In his diary, he wrote about his sexual encounters with not with crickets, and others. He wrote about a needing to stop stealing money from Donald's SSI checks. He talked about Project Miranda, which was his fantasy of kidnapping and enslaving women in his bunker. He wrote about selling pot and other things to make money. He spoke of Operation Fish, which I believe was his notion or his name for killing his, quote, friend, Charles Gunner, and stealing his identity. His issue with carrying out that was Gunner was a big guy and he didn't know if he could move the body. So this was a quandary to him. He wanted to kill Gunner, but the logistics were a little off. So obviously he thinks things through more than Ing.
Yes.
Ever the manipulator that Leonard Lake was, he would move in with Gunner and continued his planning of Operation Fish. He tried to poison him, but it failed. He was now witness to the abuse Gunner was inflicting on his daughters, and it really pissed Leonard off. Courtney, why do you think Leonard was so angry about the way Gunner treated his daughters? I mean, he's attracted to underage girls and he wants to enslave women in his bunker. There's like a weird hypocrisy going on.
So Leonard believed that he was special and that he deserved to have total control of an underage sex slave. And that after enough time, his slave would then willingly meet all of his needs. He saw Gunner as being less than himself because he was overweight and on welfare, so he didn't have the same rights and privileges as Leonard in his mind. And I also think that Leonard saw the daughters as being undeserving of the abuse they received, as they were still like children, like they weren't teenagers yet.
Mm-hmm. It's, he's so against government assistance, and yet he's stealing Donald's SSI checks.
Well, yeah, because he's more important than anything else.
Yeah. On May 24th, 1983, according to his diary entry, quote, Phase 1 of Fish complete, finally. So, Gunner was now missing. His ex-wife refused to take the girls, so for a while, Leonard looked after them. The daughters did not seem to miss their abusive father, and when it was clear that Gunner was not going to come back, a family friend fostered the girls. Leonard sold off Gunner's items and took his car. So, yeah, killed Gunner.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Charles Ing was in prison serving an 18-month sentence. He and Leonard kept in touch via letter. While incarcerated, Charles spoke of his plans to create a team to rob banks. This escalated to stealing missiles and shooting down planes, mass murder, etc. His friend he had made in prison started to think he should find a new inmate to talk to because Charles was a little bit scary. And he would reportedly chant, quote, no pain, no gain, and kill, kill, kill. He talked about blowing up a bus station and bringing down a jet so a lot of people would perish. He also spoke of doing unspeakable acts to women. Courtney, any thoughts on Charles' increasingly dark fantasies?
So I do believe, if I'm remembering from the book, that the two chants came from Charles's days in the Marine Corps, kind of hyping up himself and his crewmates, who, some of them had maybe their own violent tendencies that weren't so Boy Scout-like. Mm-hmm. But as for his personal fantasies, my guess would be that they were influenced by two things. First, I suspect that during their time together, Charles and Leonard talked a lot about violent plans and what to do when Leonard's World War III nuclear holocaust came to be. And, all the things that they would like to do to a sex slave that they might share. And then the second is just simply time with nothing else to occupy his thoughts while in prison. He would have been able to follow every violent rabbit hole that came into his mind just sitting in his cell.
Well, Ing had another letter-writing relationship with a woman named Sally while serving time in prison. Ing sent her little gifts, and she was happy that his letters were not vulgar like some of the others she had received from inmates. So apparently he holds his tongue when he's addressing a lady.
Right.
But not so much with his cellmates.
Yes.
Although she could not make it to Leavenworth Prison, she did ask Charles to visit her when he was released. At this time, Leonard moved again, renting a new place near Ukiah. He was still determined to see through Operation Miranda, the enslavement of a woman, and began digging out a hillside to create his bunker where he would keep his sex slaves. At this time, he bought a female German Shepherd and named her Wubon. He decided the site he started for his bunker was no good, and so he moved everything hours away in Calaveras County, where Crickett's family had property. Once settled, he again searched for female targets for Operation Miranda. Charles Ng was dishonorably discharged from the Marines and was released altogether in June of 1984. He met up with Leonard at this time. He was amazed that he hadn't been deported. He was, after all, not a U.S. citizen. And he met up with Sally, the letter-writing romance, in Oklahoma. They had a few days together and went their separate ways. He would then stay with Leonard's sister for a while, but then found a place in San Francisco. Leonard also was staying in San Francisco and took it upon himself to teach Charles to drive because he just wasn't great at it. Leonard's digging up this bunker, but he's still all over the place.
Right.
So, any comments, Courtney?
I'm also a little bit surprised that Charles was not deported, but I guess if his military record listed him as being born in the U.S., and he was in a military prison, so it could have been overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
But just saying, if this mistake had not been made, though, it may have prevented some of the horrors that occurred after Charles and Leonard reunited.
True. All right, well, I'm going to get into the murders now. We already discussed that Leonard allegedly killed his brother Donald and his, quote, friends Charles Gunner and used their identities and stole their SSI income, etc., cars, sold off their crap. When Charles Ng got out, it looks like they just kind of started a rampage of killing together. They abducted women and would hold them captive, but they also killed men and entire families, including children. All right, here we go. Or do you want to say anything before I start on this list?
Just that, this is a little bit different from our typical serial killing, in that they do not discriminate between their victims.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily have a specific victim type when it comes to murder.
And it's not all sexually motivated.
Right. There is a lot of this that is for other reasons.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that later.
Okay. On July 11th, 1984, Donald Giuliotti looked to be the first victim after Ng was released. They found him because of a personal ad he put in the paper. He was a gay man looking for a heterosexual partner. Now, I don't know if he put his address in the paper or what, but he answered the door one evening to a stranger who shot him in the head at close range. His roommate was there, and he was also shot twice, but the roommate luckily survived. And he was able to describe to the police that an Asian man had shot him before he fled. I assume the house was ransacked for money or stuff to sell, but I was unable to find that information. Do you want to read this next one?
Sure. A couple of weeks later, another man put an ad in the paper advertising that he had video equipment for sale. His name was Harvey Dubs, and he had a wife, Deborah, and a 1-year-old baby boy, Sean. On the night in question, Deborah was on the phone with a friend when she told that friend that some men were at the house interested in the video equipment, and she had to go. That was the last correspondence anyone would have with this family. A neighbor saw an Asian man carrying a large duffel bag out of the residence that day, and it sounds like they may have gone back a few times over the next several days based on witnesses who say they saw an Asian man in glasses and a white man with a beard multiple times going in and out. One of the pair, most likely Leonard, called Harvey's employer and told him that Harvey had to go to Washington for an emergency. The coworkers were suspicious and eventually went to the residence, but these three have never been found.
Right, so far as we know, it hasn't been women, it hasn't been Operation Miranda.
Not yet.
It's like they're killing people for things that they need.
Yep.
Or want, whatever. And
Yeah.
It's through want ads, people. Careful with your Craigslists and your Facebook Marketplace.
Right.
Just
also,
saying.
this was the 80s.
I know, but it's just
But
now
yes.
it's just online.
Mm-hmm. Still be careful.
Yes. So this one is per Wikipedia. In July/August of 84, Maurice Rock, 37 of San Fran, disappeared from a Carl Street rooming house known as the, quote, Pink Palace. Lake had rented a room at the Pink Palace under the pseudonym Alan Dre. Sometime after Rock disappeared, the woman renting the room next to Rock saw a man removing a refrigerator from his room. stole a freaking fridge. The man introduced himself as Steve and offered to photograph her. Sorry. It's just obviously that's Leonard. She agreed, but felt unsettled and changed her mind once, quote, Steve came to her room with his camera equipment. She later identified the man as Lake. Rock's remains were recovered from the Wilseyville property, which is where they end up.
Right, the Calaveras County property.
Yeah. Want to do the next one?
Yes. So then, on October 15th, 1984, Randy Jacobson, 35 of San Francisco, disappeared from the rooming house after being involved in a business deal with Leonard Lake. His identity was subsequently stolen by Lake, and Lake also tried to steal Jacobson's van after the murder, but was unsuccessful as the van was towed away before Lake was able to move it. Jacobson's remains were buried under the chicken coop on the Wilseyville property.
So, I mean, we just kind of talked about this, but what do you think about these victims and why they're chosen? It's not to the culmination yet, of at least of what Leonard talks about in his diary of wanting to do this Operation Miranda.
Right, yeah. So these victims seem to be more about, like, convenience, revenge, or necessity. You know, Donald seems to have been murdered so that, Charles could rob his home. The Dubs family was murdered so that Leonard and Charles could steal their camera equipment, possibly to use in Project Miranda. Maurice, it's unclear, really, but I wouldn't be surprised if Leonard also stole money or his identity as well. And Randy maybe did something during the business deal that upset Leonard. And then it was convenient for Leonard to try and take his vehicle and identity, as that was his pattern for continuing to evade the police.
So that's where we're going to stop today. We'll have one more after this.
Yes, part 4.
Part 4 is the final part of this awful duo.
Right. Where we'll learn much more about Project Miranda and where these two got their name of the torture killers.
Anything else?
Just don't post your address in public places.
Right.
And lock your doors.
Lock your doors. I mean, the way that they don't discriminate reminds me of, the Night Stalker.
Right. And just whoever is around and is like, all right, I need
Yeah.
a new car. I'm going to kill this guy.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Stay safe. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.